Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Karen Calder, the Shropshire Co-Chair of the committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. This meeting is being held using remote technology, and should any committee members experience technical difficulties during the meeting, they should immediately contact the designated IT officer on the number they have already been supplied with. Everyone is requested to mute their microphones unless asked to speak. Please only use the chat function to indicate the desire to speak. Do not use it for anything else. As the Chair, I will interpret the Council's existing standing orders in light of the requirements of remote participation with advice from the Monitor Officer prior to making a ruling. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosable pecuniary interest they have in any of the items on the agenda. I will ask everyone invited to speak during the committee, including members of the committee and officers, to introduce themselves each time before they speak. I will now do a roll call of members. If you have any disclosable pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed, which is not included in the register of interest, please indicate at this point and leave the meeting prior to the matter being discussed. As the Chair, I have no interest to declare. I'll now run through a roll call of the members. Councillor Stephen Burrell. David Beachy. Ian Hume.
Present, no interest to declare.
Steve Burrell, no interest to declare.
That was Ian Hume.
Correct, Karen.
Thank you. I'll go back. Councillor Stephen Burrell.
No interest to declare, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. David Beachy. Councillor Heather Kidd.
No interest to declare.
Thank you, Heather. Hilary Knight.
No interest to declare.
Janet O'Loughlin.
Interest to declare, Chair.
Janet Loughlin. Councillor Stephen Reynolds.
Nothing to declare. Here in
Thank
Telford.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dag Saunders. Councillor Mad Shinton has given her apologies. Councillor Derek White.
Present, no interest to declare.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask if there are other participants who are speaking, if they are present and are able to declare their presence, so to speak. So I've got Sam Tilley, Director of Planning CCG for the Winter Plan, and Nigel Lee, Chief Operating Officer for SATH for the Winter Plan item.
I've asked our IT support to look at getting those in immediately, Karen.
Okay. If and when they do arrive, can you let me know, please? Then we've got Daniel Webb, Overview and Scrutiny Officer for Shropshire Council.
Hello there, present, correct.
Thank you. Joseph Galkowski.
Present.
Stacey Worthington.
Present.
And Amanda Hollyoak.
Present.
I will now turn to the items on the agenda. Are there any other apologies for absence?
No other apologies that I'm aware of, Chair.
Thank you. Disclosable pecuniary interests have been dealt with during the initial roll call of the meeting. Item 3 is I move the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of August 2020 as circulated with the agenda papers be signed as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
Yeah, if you wish.
Thank you. Who was that?
Councillor Steve Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. I can accept these minutes as a true record unless anyone indicates differently. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is system winter planning. I'm going to ask Sam Tilley, Director of Planning, CCG, and Nigel Lee, Chief Operating Officer, SAF, to speak to the paper circulated previously to members. Are they with us, Amanda?
They don't appear to be with us, I'm afraid, Chair. If we could just perhaps adjourn for 2 minutes and I will work on getting them in.
Okay, can we do that? So if we adjourn for, it's now 2:05. If we adjourn till 2:10.
Thank you, Chair. That would be great.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Nigel. We've been having a few IT problems. We've been able to get Sam Tilley on the phone. She can hear, but she can't speak. So we're trying to resolve that problem at the moment. I don't know if you feel able to deliver the report on your own, or whether you need Sam in certain sections of it to support you.
I say Sam, I know, was also trying, so my apologies, Chair. When I logged on, I could hear you loud and clear, and I obviously hadn't signed in on the correct mechanism, so I've now got that. I know that Sam is trying the same. If I call her, then I know, because we were speaking as we were doing that. So let me see whether I can do that as well. Hello, Sam. I've got in loud and clear. I'm with Karen as chair and with colleagues on the HOSC. Did you want to join also through this medium as well, if it's easier, unless you're trying to actually get through on the I can't get the Teams to work, so that's happening. Okay. May I just check, Chair? Sam is on the phone, and obviously it's just next to my computer. May I check whether you can hear her? Otherwise, I'll happily represent.
She's very broken. I don't know how other members are hearing that, but all I could hear was I could hear her voice, but I couldn't actually precisely hear what she was saying.
Okay. Sam, do you want to just try again to speak? I'll put you nice and close. Yeah, is that any better?
That's better for me, yeah.
Okay. So if I, Sam and myself, and as you expect, many others, Chair, have worked very closely on the system winter plan. There's a document which I believe has been sent through to yourself and colleagues. So shall I let Sam proceed with that through this mechanism, and then I'll add anything else going forward? And if it does break up, then obviously I'll chip in and take over.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sam.
We get there in the end. Okay, hopefully the paper is relatively self-explanatory and sets out both the context that we're operating in this year and the process that we've been going through to address the issues that we face over winter. So I'm sure everybody will be acutely aware that this year is very different to previous years, particularly because of the COVID incident response that we are managing alongside our other usual winter demands. So that forms the backdrop of the planning that we've been doing. You'll see that there's a number of issues that raises for us in terms of the way that we've taken this planning forward, in terms of how we can manage the capacity within the hospital trust, whilst also ensuring we have the appropriate processes and services available, and adhering to the most up-to-date guidelines in terms of managing COVID itself. Clearly, there's a significant interdependency between how we will manage any winter additional demands with that COVID element as well. So with all these things in mind, we've been through a process of looking at options for winter schemes. So these are schemes that we believe will have an important impact in terms of preserving capacity within the acute trust during the winter months. And these are not only things focused on the acute trust itself, but also other elements out in the community. So looking at the whole pathway from the community into the acute trust and back out again. So we've had a multi-agency approach to this, a number of workshops and detailed discussions in terms of maximising the impact, and through that process we've whittled down to a number of key schemes that we believe will have the right level of impact. I think the members of the committee will fully understand that there are significant challenges, and that this is not the end of the process, that the process will continue as the weeks go on, and we will keep monitoring and refining our position as that actual real-time data comes through. So I think probably those are the headlines from the report, focusing on the areas you would expect around admissions avoidance, discharge, etc. So it's probably now best to hand over to Nigel for any particular details he wants to add around the acute trust, and then any questions.
Thanks, Sam. And if it's okay with you, Chair, just a few key points. I think that the important thing is, and we certainly were adopting the same approach last year, this is absolutely a whole system plan. And as Sam has highlighted, that's health and social care. And we've actually involved and are involving a range of voluntary sector partners, our mental health trust and others, because it's not only winter once again coming, but also, as Sam said, with the pandemic, which is bringing its own unique and additional challenges. But I would really stress that this is a whole system approach. And even if we look at the work that we're doing with looking to recover as much elective activity as possible, and there's many patients who've been on waiting lists for a long time, and certainly was classed as more routine rather than our A&E attenders, that's obviously still a significant priority for us. But we are working, certainly as Acute Trust, with Robert Jones and Agnes Hunt Trust in Oswestry. We're working with the Nuffield, with the independent sector, and we've got NHS Improvement, NHS England also helping us with investment. So as an example of that, we've just had an additional CT imaging mobile unit arrive at the beginning of October, and that'll be with us for the next 6 months. So all of these things are part of our overall response. I think the COVID scenario, and again as referenced, this is still a significant unknown. We've seen the national response be far more tailored to individual systems than it was in the initial phase. I actually live in Wales, and we're on lockdown from Friday, and there's different parts of both the Northwest and the Midlands which are seeing different presentations. But there's no doubt that the COVID numbers are starting to increase once again, and not only are we working on managing that carefully within our system, but also that we're part of a region, and so we've been helping out Walsall, for example, last week when their critical care reached a significant point. So but we can also expect some of that support in return. So we're not sitting there just managing some of this within our own borders. The vaccination programme is mentioned. All I would say is that, and again, you'll probably know as much as us on some of this. This is a huge bit of work. It's really, really important to get right, as people who know about these things better than me. But that'll be into December and into next year before we start seeing anything on that. And so there's probably little more to say on that. I just wanted to reference it because I know that it's something which I get as questions from my neighbours and others. We can't probably answer much more. 2 further points, if I may. I've talked about investment, something like the imaging, the CT scanner which arrived. We've also got 2 MRI mobiles, and also the system and nationally has supported us with making some of that investment substantive. So there's a CT scanner and MR scanner being put in. It's probably going to be about March time next year. But what that means is that we're not just looking at this winter, we're also looking at some of the investment in capacity for supporting both urgent and other activity going forward into next year. We're not going to solve some of the waiting list issues, and that's nationally, just in the next couple of months. So it's really important that we're planning for next year and beyond as well as now. I think the final one is about how we're trying to focus on our support for people. We know that our staff have been through a significant challenge. We had a busy winter. We've then had a pandemic, and lots of people are both tired and have been stressed. You know, there's been some real challenges, and we're now going into a busy time and obviously trying to do recovery. So we're conscious, and that's staff across many groups, both the acute and others, and also how we support patients, especially those people who are on waiting lists. We've done a significant amount of work more recently with anyone on admitted waiting lists, so those people who've had decisions, to be clear about where they sit on the waiting list and how they can get access to help. And that's therefore working with our primary care colleagues, the community teams, and making sure that, again, we're having a whole system approach to supporting patients and reinforcing that national message that the NHS is not closed, especially where anyone has got any urgent conditions. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Nigel. I've got a couple of questions before I open up to other members. This report, it says it was presented to the System Gold Command on the 2nd of October. Is this the report that actually went to the Gold Command as it is?
Do you want to pick that one up, Sam?
Yes, so largely, yes. Obviously, it's been updated since that time for this particular forum.
And were there any areas or issues that was picked up at the System Gold Command meeting reference this paper?
Well, I think there's been a number of discussions, as you would expect, in terms of the challenges that we're going to face. It's a very precarious situation in terms of managing the competing demands, as both myself and Nigel have explained. So there is an ongoing dialogue. The winter planning is a regular discussion point at Gold and with another forum. Yes, I think there is a level of concern about the overall pressures that the NHS will be facing this winter, not just in Shropshire and Telford, but across the system as a whole.
Mm. I was pleased that you mentioned, you picked out the points around staff resilience and workforce capacity challenges, because this is not new, is it? This is something that the system has been struggling with year on year, and I can only imagine that it must be getting increased, that pressure must be increasing rather than decreasing. I think as we came into this pandemic, many people were sort of buoyed up by adrenaline and the need to sort of pull that little bit harder, but this has been going on for some time now, hasn't it? I'm stating the obvious, but so I'm trying to understand what risk has been identified around those challenges of staff resilience and the workforce capacity issues. You know, what are you able to how are you able to mitigate those challenges in this instance, as opposed to last year when it was equally as challenging? I'm trying to get a clear understanding. That's what I have a problem with a little bit with this report, is it's not much on detail. And whilst I don't want to be swamped with the minutiae, I'm having difficulty understanding what the risk is, and what level is that risk, and what you're doing to mitigate the risk, particularly in terms of staff resilience and workforce issues.
So if I just touch on the workforce issues to start with, we know that we have some challenges as a system, aside from the situation that faces us now, and those workforce issues are exacerbated by the additional pressure that managing COVID brings. We do have a system people group who are bringing together all the partner organisations to look at how we manage this workforce situation In the longer term, but obviously particularly over the next few months, there are a number of mitigations that are being worked on. We have developed a memorandum of understanding across all the key partner organisations that will allow us to redeploy staff across the system to where there is greatest need, and reuse that in the first wave of the pandemic in order to manage that, and we continue to build on that. We have an active Bring Back Staff programme through the NHS to staff that have left in the recent past and wish to come back into service. We also have an overseas recruitment programme that's underway. So there's a range of mitigating actions, and Nigel may want to talk more particularly about the acute trust that we are working through. But I think it is fair to say that there is no easy answer to this. It is getting a great deal of attention, and we are working through our options, but the pressures are immense.
I think thank you, Sam. That was. I don't think we're expecting easy answers or solutions. You know, if there were, my goodness, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? But I think we're just trying to get an understanding of the depth of the issue and the level of the risk associated with this particular issue. Can I just clarify one point? When you talk about the whole system and sharing, you know, staff as and when they're needed, does that also include the private sector, i.e. nursing homes?
Yes, to a degree. It includes the local authorities. We have had some challenges around the care sector in particular, and again, not wanting to get into the detail, but in terms of insurance arrangements and all of those things. But it's certainly something that we have been playing into our planning throughout.
I think what we have done, Chair, is with our care home colleagues, there's actually been a fair amount of support for the care homes rather than necessarily bringing them out of their sector. So whether that's infection control advice, whether it's support with PPE and also the training on some of that. So actually there's been some where we're looking at a whole system approach that's not necessarily just supporting the acute. I'll talk about a couple of other things if I may in a second, but with it's trying to identify as a system where our areas of highest risk are and how best that we collectively support that. So my health and safety team and our infection control team have been supporting the care homes, for example, and our procurement team is actually already a Shropshire-wide service. So we've been able to flex some of both the expertise and also supplies accordingly. And
I've got Hilary Knight who wants to ask a question, and also Derek. But whilst we're talking about care homes, can I just raise a point that another member raised just recently, and that was around lessons learnt, and particularly around discharge from hospitals, from the acute into care homes. I suppose it's just the opportunity for you to reiterate that those lessons have been learned about ensuring that patients are COVID-free when being discharged into nursing homes, care homes.
Absolutely, there was a national change on this quite early on in April, but I think we already had quite an active integrated discharge hub. And quite a careful management of the pathways in patients, and I suppose there is a bit around, you know, even as early as in April, areas were learning lessons, and in Shropshire we were lucky enough to not see the first COVID wave as early as London and the South East, and therefore some of those lessons had been able to start to be learned early. But we have, you know, absolutely since then had a very strict process of swabbing patients, getting a negative result to then discharge patients, or if they were still active cases, then both from a community hospital and also identified, you know, 1 or 2 key care homes where we can care safely for COVID positive patients. So I think there's been quite a few lessons on managing within this sort of environment, but that's been one of the key ones. May I just mention 2 very quick points? Sorry to in with colleagues that just on the workforce front. You may recall one of the key things that certainly SATH was doing, and I know we're doing a little bit of this wider than the system. We were already doing a lot of work, especially with India, on nursing staff. That those colleagues had started to arrive. That got interrupted with obviously the international travel, but that has restarted. So that was, and like you said, Chair, some of these issues were not just because of COVID, and so the work done on the previous, 9 to 12 months has meant that some of those workforce have started to arrive and started to add to our workforce, and that's especially in our wards and also A&E. And also some of the ways in which we've mitigated bringing on additional capacity, we are using companies that therefore are able to add staff. So, for example, our mobile imaging is with radiography staff as part of that from those companies. And that means that whilst we have gone to 7 days from our own scanners and have been doing that for some time, some of this is not adding just simply to the existing staff. We are bringing other people in as part of agencies, and we've done that for endoscopy, for imaging, and 1 or 2 other areas as well.
Thank you. That's useful to know. Thank you, Nigel. I've got Hilary and then Derek. Hilary.
Thank you, Karen. It's just really a little bit more of a clarification around beds, because obviously you are going to need more beds. And I wondered how you were going to achieve that, given your limited, the limitations of the buildings, I suppose. But also you mentioned in one of the papers about looking for additional community bed capacity. And I wondered how you are managing that, especially in the light of some of the closures that there have been in community bed capacity over the last few years.
If I start off with the acute side, one of our key risks, and Sam mentioned it in terms of the discussions at Gold, we know that we've got a capacity challenge. We've been working, and obviously part of our Future Fit programme is looking at upgrading that capacity and making it fit for purpose for the next 20-30 years or more. There's been a lot of discussion on that, and we have been awarded some additional capital. We've got work that's underway. If anyone's been to the Shrewsbury site more recently, we're at the front door of A&E. Whilst that's not acute beds, it's adding ambulatory space, and this means that we're adding our capacity to treat some patients and have pathways direct into an ambulatory environment, a same-day environment, and reducing the need to admit some of those patients. We are also, as part of that investment, we have, and colleagues may remember last year, we had some capital which allowed us to move our midwifery-led unit from one part of Telford to the other, actually alongside the consultant-led unit, and a really nice fit-for-purpose unit for mums and families. And that space is being refurbished at the minute, which will provide another 20 beds, and that will come on, and both of those come online at Christmas time. So I think we have had some actual increase in capacity, but it's one of the areas that I'm still, I absolutely am still concerned about, as is all of our key partners in the system. And I think the work that we do on discharge to optimise that, and that's our community teams, local authorities and other, is one of those. Making sure we support our teams doing the work on a daily basis is important. And all the work that we're trying to do in Think 111 First and ambulatory care to make sure that people are absolutely, and prospective patients are able to access advice or options other than coming into A&E. And I think it's a really careful balance, Hilary, that we want to make sure that we support the national agenda of making sure we don't send any message that, for example, for some reason health is not open for those patients that need it. But in the flip side, not always is A&E the right course of action when actually we have got obviously some really poorly people. Yeah. Did you want to follow up at all, Sam?
I think you've covered that very nicely, Nigel.
Anything on the community at all, or?
Community beds, really, I think.
Yes, I mean, in terms of the community position, I mean, it is obviously very closely linked to discharge, as Nigel has mentioned. We're working very closely with the Community Trust in terms of the capacity within the community hospitals. We do have good capacity within those settings at the moment, notwithstanding some impact from sort of social distancing and IPC guidance that we need to adhere to. We're very much working on the basis of home first being the absolute priority and making sure that we can adequately wrap care around patients to enable them to go home as a first option to preserve that community bed capacity for where it's absolutely needed, and obviously working very much in a sort of system way in terms of domiciliary care and our care homes to make sure that we're managing this in the round. But again, I think as Nigel has described in terms of the acute setting, we also potentially have challenges around how we manage that community capacity. We are also looking outside of our system to how we might work with wider partners should we need mutual aid in that sense. So all avenues are being explored.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Derek next, and then Heather.
Thank you. Hi, Lee. How are you doing? Lee, the area that I'd like to, two areas I'd like to actually explore. The first one is the discharge. Now, we want as fast a discharge as possible, which is as long as it is safe. But one of the biggest and most common delays that we have is the delivery of the medication prior to actually discharge itself, and also the writing of the prescriptions for that medication. And patients, and certainly from my experience, I've seen many people actually just standing there waiting hour after hour for the medication to come so they can actually leave the hospital. What are you actually going to be doing to speed that up? And the other thing is regarding the primary care. You basically said that we need to try and avoid admissions, but primary care seems to be struggling under a huge weight itself and not coping very well. Now, if primary care is not operating to full capacity and therefore trying to stop patients going into the hospital and making the pressure, then we really have got a problem, haven't we?
So I'll invite Sam in a second then to perhaps cover the primary care one, Derek, but I'll cover the point on discharge and delays. It is something that we've been trying to tackle for a little while, and ironically it improved somewhat during the middle of COVID, and one of the reasons for that is that the pure volume of patients that we had in the hospital was slightly less, so people had a little bit of time to do that. So what we've been doing is that we've reinvigorated some work, especially with our doctors, and both the consultants and also the junior doctors, to look at identifying those patients that are discharged, and instead of them doing their ward rounds in a particular way, to make sure that they're able to peel off one or two of their juniors to help complete the summaries and get those medications ordered. The other bit is looking at how much of this planning actually could be done the night before or the day before, because some of this is not necessarily new on the day, as many patients will know. So there's a program of improvement that we've refreshed as soon as we could get a couple of extra people in, and it was right to get an extra couple of people on wards. So we've been doing that over the last few weeks, and so there's still a challenge, because it still needs appropriately authorised people to access the medication software, for all the obvious reasons. We're having some improvements on that, but there's still a lot of work to do, Derek. I would agree with you. It's still an area that we need to work on. Sam?
Thank you. So in terms of primary care, I mean, clearly this is a very important part of the sort of system pathway for patients, and we've been working closely with primary care in terms of managing the additional pressures that they're seeing at the moment. And this again is part of a sort of wider approach around communications with patients and the public about where they can access support, working with the community pharmacies, working with our primary care networks as they're developing around collaboration across practices. There are a number of things that we put in place during the first COVID peak that we're now revisiting in terms of whether they would be suitable options to reinstate going forward. And we've been surveying our practices in terms of how they would like to receive support and what would work best for them. I mean, the second wave, if you want to call it that, the sort of emerging trends around COVID are different to in the first peak, and we're just understanding how that is manifesting, and therefore where we need to best direct our resources around and our focus around primary care. But those discussions are very much happening in acknowledgement that they are also experiencing significant pressure along with the rest of the system.
Can I just come back on just to ask a question around Derek's first question around pharmacy and discharge medication. I'm trying to understand. You're saying that you've changed the system on the ward rounds that will allow the junior medics to take up that role that would have previously been taken up by the more senior clinicians. I'm still not clear is there a problem then in the pharmacies, a workforce issue in the pharmacy where there is still challenges?
Sorry if I've misled. So no, not necessarily. It's about making sure that because our wards are obviously busy, quite a lot of sick patients, the rounds normally are led by a consultant with obviously other members of their team, of which pharmacy and others are part of that. And so the delays, I think, as Derek has articulated, are sometimes with getting the summaries and the approvals for the medication, and that is not always as timely as it needs to be. So the reason for me saying it is normally the junior doctors as part of that team, the non-consultant grades that complete the various different bits of the administration, but they need to be explicitly allowed to crack on and do that. And I say that we've still got some variances across the team, Chair. We're the different specialty teams, and much of that is making sure that we've got appropriate action on the most sickest patients on the ward. So that will indeed vary on a daily basis. What we have done, one of the other, in parallel, there have been some changes on the pharmacy software over the past 6 months, because we recognised that was one of the blockers. The other bit was we need to make sure that we've got a reasonable workforce, so back down to the workforce bit of the junior doctors. So there's been investment over the past 15 months in increasing the junior doctor numbers, particularly for medicine. So it's multifaceted. And as I say, but some of this then is about making sure that we've got due balance between appropriate, timely care for the sickest patients, and then also then balancing the actions that are needed to get a timely discharge.
Karen, what I actually experienced was that the desk was having to chase around the doctors to actually try and get the proper medication so they can actually leave the ward. And that was, and in one case, it must have been nearly best part of 6 hours to actually get the medication to the person, and he was extremely upset because the family was waiting there to wheel him out, and that wasn't unusual, so I was told.
Can I ask what might seem to be a stupid question, but is there any reason why a prescription cannot be dispensed through a external pharmacy if the patient is able to access an external pharmacy? Does it have to be processed through the hospital pharmacy?
You're probably entering an area that I don't know sufficient about the local agreements, Chair. I know that some areas, if they've got on-site, like a Lloyd's pharmacy or others, there's different processes in that. I'll need to check on exactly what the protocols are. I think what we do need to do in that case is make sure that we've got appropriate both stocks and processes for those pharmacies that would therefore need to support that process. And I say the hospital pharmacies are obviously stocked and ready to do that. So I'll need to check on that, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Okay, if you could come back, that would be informative, I think. I've got Heather next.
Thank you. A couple of issues. One on discharge. I had somebody in my village recently have a heart attack, was admitted to Shrewsbury, went to Stoke for a stent, came back to the Royal Shrewsbury late at night on the Friday, but had to wait for discharge until the Monday and didn't get home until late afternoon on the Monday because she couldn't be discharged. She was relatively well. Because there was no doctor available to see her. So that's another issue around it. It wasn't the pharmacy that held her up. It was waiting for what I assumed we now had 7-day care and teams in hospitals because that's what we were all driving for, but that didn't happen on this occasion. So this may have been a one-off, it may not. So I'm just interested in that process because if people are fit to go home, they really ought to be able to go home. My other challenge is I've been on a local government association meeting today and many colleagues of mine and council leaders were reporting that actually hospitals were very full at the present time. They're not A&E, they're I've forgotten the word, intensive care beds and so on were full, but not necessarily of COVID. They're actually full of a number of other things because of course everybody's been trying to pick up all the cancer care, diabetes issues, all sorts of other acute conditions. And I'm really interested to see where our hospitals are with that as against to the COVID beds and what we're going to do about those very things that we concentrate on COVID and flu in the winter, but actually those people who are suffering from other conditions that need urgent care too, which were put on hold during the spring and summer.
Okay. Couple of things, if I may, Heather. Just to reiterate, certainly from a local system, we never stopped doing urgent cancer surgery locally. I know that some of the bigger tertiary centres there was some interruption, but certainly for our colorectal surgery and others that we do here, then we didn't stop doing that. But I accept that your point is rather more broad. Our hospitals are busy. I think what we are tackling at the minute is the challenges of managing the patient pathways carefully. We have needed to separate out patients that are arriving that are potentially high risk, either those with known symptoms or potential systems that would mark them out as potential COVID patients, and make sure they're properly separated out. And the ambulance service help us with this from the moment they arrive in A&E and then through into the wards. So that in itself is where last year, well, we absolutely wanted to try and make sure that patients are, in respiratory wards or cardiology wards. Actually, if we did need to outlie a patient to make sure a patient was in an appropriate medical bed, that was more important than not being able to offload from an ambulance or stay in ED, because we could absolutely wrap the appropriate support around. So it is difficult. Our critical care do have a number of COVID patients, but we absolutely have patients with other conditions, and we're in that position. So I think there's a couple of things. The first one is it relates to some of the discussions we've just had before on bed capacity that we're trying to manage. For critical care per se, there's been the chair mentioned about lessons learned. This is one of the lessons learned from our first wave, that firstly we have been able to access more equipment. We have a surge plan for our critical care, which initially moves into a couple of theatres that we keep spare at this stage as critical care expansion, because some of this can't just happen, you know, it needs to happen urgently if it needs it. The second one is we're in a formal collaborative with the University Hospital North Midlands at Stoke. And we've been working out how we might do, and Sam mentioned mutual aid. This is one of the examples of that. And the final one is that within critical care, the adult critical care network is very, very active. And I mentioned just the other day, actually, we were a recipient of a couple of patients from Walsall. So they found themselves in that very position, and then very quickly across the region, we were able to access and have that mutual aid. And I say that we may well be in a position to receive that help as much as being in a position to help accordingly. It's going to be a continued challenge through the winter. It was last year. It is with COVID. I think all I would say is that we're alive to those challenges. There's a lot of dialogue both within the acute and with the system, and I think more importantly with our regional coordinators and other neighbouring trusts, so particularly Wolverhampton, Stoke, and certainly within the system with Robert Jones for some of the elective activity as well.
Can I just come back and the 7-day care for waiting for discharge, and would it be possible, Karen, that we have some sort of report back on the level?
Obviously, I don't know the detail on the. Oh, sorry, my apologies.
And it would be quite nice in the future to have a report back on the balance between beds being full of emergency admissions and the not just cancer, because I know we've done very well with cancer, but actually the other acute conditions that we need to look at, and how that is affecting the rest of the population, not just those with COVID. But yeah, if somebody could find out about the staffing issue over a weekend, because we've been led to believe on several occasions that we're not doing a Monday to Friday service.
Okay, so the majority of services still provide absolutely on call, but also activity at weekends. But that is still not necessarily every service on both days across the weekends at both sites. However, where we've got patients that are identified for discharge, those should and are normally identified on the Friday and then again on the Saturday with various different rounds, and we have additional discharge consultants that are on duty every weekend at both sites that go around to all wards and help complete those discharges. So I can, obviously I don't know the detail of the individual case there, so that, unless this patient wasn't correctly identified as being ready for discharge on that discharge consultant's caseload, I certainly have been on call where that sort of issue has arisen, and rung the consultant on call and made the appropriate arrangements. There is absolutely pharmacy and medical staff on duty and in the hospital that will be able to enact that. So yeah.
So I'm just trying to unpick what you're asking for, Heather. Are you asking for what, if you like, is there a dashboard picture of what what the landscape looks like in terms of take up of beds, COVID, against, what you would normally expect to see?
And
is
the
that what you're
conditions
asking?
that need the treatment of those beds? Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there any way that we can get that sort of information, Nigel?
Yes, perhaps I can touch base with you outside of this chair, just in terms of, and because as you'll appreciate, some of this changes on a daily basis.
Yeah.
If we look at the situation now, then we've got in the order of mid-20s of patients with COVID that we're caring for, out of a bed base of 680 or so. But I think what we've got is obviously confirmed cases, And then we've got every day a range of patients who are potential cases, and obviously we take appropriate care with those.
Yeah.
In critical care, we're not the biggest critical care unit across the 2 sites. We've probably got about a third of our capacity taken up with COVID cases or potential COVID cases.
Yeah, I think that was the kind of detail that Heather, you were looking for, was it? You know,
it's that sort of thing, but also if we can compare it with last year with no COVID, that would be quite useful. And we've got more capacity, so actually if we've got more capacity and we've learned a lot of lessons, then actually we should be performing better than last year.
Yeah, so some of that extra capacity in beds is not in there yet. That'll be Christmas time before we get some of that extra capacity. On the flip side, I think we've got some surge plans, for example, in critical care, which have been, which were put into place and refined, over the past few months. And certainly our critical care colleagues are very, very well versed and planned for different scenarios. And especially, I think, as I say, I wouldn't want to underestimate this. It's really, really important that we do the care, so not only appropriately for something like critical care, but are segregating those patients that are COVID positive, and as well as other people, because we are obviously dealing with the most vulnerable of patients there.
Yeah. Thank you. Can I just, I've just got a few more minutes just before we need to close this report down for the agenda. But I just want to refer back to the report, and it's around local winter planning arrangements, that paragraph there. And it's the bullet point that says what has not worked well previously, but must this year, and it's got 4 bullet points underneath that, and it's got admission avoidance scheme, ambulance handovers, staffing issues across services, and lack of flexibility across organisational boundaries. I'm just wondering, what more is being done to ensure that these ones that haven't worked well previously will deliver this year?
So shall I come in and start on that one? So I think that goes back to some of the issues that we've touched on before. So in particular, the sort of lack of flexibility across organisational boundaries and the staffing issues. COVID has helped to move that agenda forward quite significantly. So just touching back on some of the issues that we covered earlier, we do now have arrangements in place that allow us to share staff across the system. We have a number of multi-agency fora that have been set up now to focus on specific issues. So we're not doing that in silos as organisations. We've made some significant strides forward in terms of working as a system and what our system priorities are, which has been helped, as you would imagine, by having to all come together to work against the common enemy, which is COVID. So we're in a different environment this year, where channels of dialogue, the sort of default setting of problem solving as a system around certain issues is much more at the forefront than it has been previously, and some of those wider system.
No, you've broken up, Sam. I can't hear.
Much more accessible to us in terms of.
Oh, sorry.
I think I've got to the point, so you may want to comment, Nigel.
Okay. Can I just check with Chair? Can you still hear us? Okay. Sorry,
I can hear you, but Sam broke up for about 3 or 4 seconds.
Okay. So did you catch the main points that Sam was making, Mob?
I did, but I don't know whether in that gap that she alluded or mentioned anything around ambulance handovers and what more was being done to ensure that this operates at a smoother.
So I think for me that is a significant link to the investment and the capacity at the front door that we need. The ambulance handovers are a feature, unfortunately, and I was talking to colleagues across the system today, and we're seeing that across many organisations, that the Royal Shrewsbury site has got a small A&E, and we quite quickly then, if there's any peaks in demand, then we're not as able to cope as some of the bigger organisations, and certainly, for example, our Telford site is better equipped. But the investment that we've got, which comes online at Christmas time with the ambulatory environment, is really going to help. Firstly, it's a better pathway because some of these patients don't necessarily need to come through A&E. They can go direct to an appropriate physician. But secondly, it provides that extra space.
So
it's linked to. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. So is this yet another sort of indication, or don't know how to put this. If you're saying that there are patients coming into A&E that really shouldn't be coming into A&E, I suppose the simple question is, why are they coming into A&E? What is being, is it sort of over caution and aversion to any sort of risk by the ambulance service?
No, I think what I would make is the differentiation about whether some of these, whether these patients need some sort of acute care. And I think what we've been working on doing is providing optimum and at the right pathways for patients. Derek was talking about primary care. Some of the pathways and the options that we need perhaps in the community should be as available to our primary care colleagues and 111 services to direct patients to. And that's one of the avenues that we've been working on, and hence the point that Sam's raised about admission avoidance. And we're trying to make sure that they're both agile and available, and also evident to those users that we need them to, and especially are directed, patients are directed. Within the acute site, there absolutely will be patients that our GPs refer in, for example, that need some support. I suppose what I'm saying is that as we increase our space, we increase. I was at Birmingham yesterday, and they've got a super facility at their front next door to A&E, where some ambulances, and we do have these pathways in place. It's just that when the space fills up, then A&E is our recourse, because obviously it's a safe place to make sure that we've got appropriate care and immediate review of the patients. If we can increase, as we're planning, the space for patients that can be checked or are absolutely supported by their GP for acute review, but are acute medicine physicians and the senior team, we've got advanced clinical practitioners and others who are very well skilled in managing patient conditions, and often those patients can be appropriately supported, treated, and then discharged the same day with then appropriate support at home. And it's about increasing a range of different options for patients that we're trying to manage.
Okay, I think this is a really sort of interesting area, and we could talk more about it, but I think we've got to draw a line under this. Can I thank you for the report? Can I also note that we will obviously be asking for this report to come back. We'd obviously want another one next year. I think the one thing that we probably all agreed on was that this is interesting, and I can see why it would go to Gold Command in this format. But those are all people who are well entrenched in this environment and this work, and they can read between the lines, they can read the shorthand, they're all very well aware of how their particular area or orbit fits into this system. For us as lay members, it's not so easy, and I think there's a lot taken for granted. And when I ask for more detail, as I said before, it's not the minutiae. Don't drown me in numbers and statistics or drown the committee. What we want to understand is a little bit more flesh on the bones. These are bold statements and bullet points they're put here, and it's trying to understand actually what does that mean, what does that look like. I know this is probably a little bit more tiresome and time consuming, for you as authors of the reports, but it's what we need as local lay members to understand. We're putting our trust in you as the system leaders, But we need that assurance, and we need the assurance as lay people, not as professionals working within the organisation. So I would ask that when we will note this report, but we will also note that as it comes back next year, we would like a little bit more flesh on the bones in terms of understanding exactly what these bullet points mean of actions that you are taking. As I say, an hour is a very short time to go through an area of work that is so important. But can I thank you both for attending?
I'm very happy to do that.
Sorry, Sam.
Just say again, Sam.
It's just saying thank you very much for that. That's really helpful in terms of how to focus the report next time, because obviously it's a very broad area.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure where you wanted me to pitch it, but that's really helpful. Thank you. So we can look at some more specific focus for that next time round.
Yeah, I mean, it all just seems very, very high level and very strategic, and what we want is a little bit more meat, as I say, on the bones. But thank you very much for presenting today. So Amanda, you're welcome. Have we got?
Yes, Chair, we do have Alison Massey and Tracy Jones present for the next item. Yeah.
Okay. So can I introduce Alison Massey, who is Senior Project Manager End of Life Review, and Tracy Jones, Deputy Director Integrated Care. They'll be presenting the next item on the agenda, which is, as mentioned, End of Life Care.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just introduce myself. I've just put the camera on briefly for those of you who haven't met me before. My name is Tracy Jones and I work as a director within Telford & Wrekin Clinical Commissioning Group. I had thought I wasn't going to be with you this week because I was on jury service, but I've been released a little earlier than planned. However, Alison has prepared the presentation and will take you through the short presentation which reflects the paper which you've all received, and then happily take the questions following the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. As Tracy mentioned, I'm Alison Massey and I'm supporting this project as a project lead. So I don't intend to spend much time going through the deck. I'll just give you an outline from each slide if that's okay for you, for the members. So if we can have the next slide, please, Amanda. So I think this was mentioned at the last meeting that Tracy and Dr. Jane Povey came to, that we had the focus of moving this review away from a traditional methodology that we were all more used to within CCGs and health providers. Next slide, please. And what we want to be able to use is that collaborative approach, which we feel will give us a greater opportunity to work collectively to understand the issues that we have for end-of-life care, and work together to design the solutions. And I think Sam mentioned earlier, I heard her saying around what we've learned through the last 6 or 7 months through COVID, and certainly I would reflect some of what she's saying around how we've broken down traditional barriers, organisational barriers, to enable us to do the right things collectively together. This slide just goes through the parameters, the general parameters of the review. So focusing on adults 18 years and upwards, people that are expected to die within the next 12 months or even within the next few days or hours. We expect it'll take 6 months, and we want to identify 4 key improvement areas and work towards the changes that together we will feel make a difference. So it's not a strategy. Next slide, please. So this slide identifies the things that we consider to frame this review. Again, learning on the COVID period. A focus on a smaller number of areas rather than the bigger, broader areas that we may have traditionally wanted to be able to do. Building on the learning, understanding the learning, collaboration and co-production, and using Healthwatch as key partners for the independent people's voice. And we have got a senior leadership sponsorship for this review. Next slide, please. This really demonstrates the key principles that will help us guide us in this process. I don't intend to go through it again. It's a fairly detailed slide, but I just want to point out that it's focused on, again, involvement and collaboration, the learning, making a difference and demonstrating what we've achieved, and also the learning from what we haven't achieved, because that's always as important as what as our achievement. Sorry, I feel a little bit, I might have rushed through that bit, but slide 7, the next slide please. This demonstrates phase 1 of the review, which has already started. We kicked that off last week and all our stakeholders have received a letter, and we've asked them to review the information that they hold, and in order to pose some questions, which we will then go on to the next slide, use to inform our second stage review. So we'll collate the themes, collate the feedback, identify some themes and work together to understand what we need to work on going forward. And I think that's it for me. It's very, very, very brief. I just really, well, Tracy has said, just wanted to give the opportunity for the members to ask questions around it rather than go through too much of the detail. I hope that gives some understanding of our approach.
Thank you. I think it's the detail that we're quite interested in, to be perfectly honest with you. This all feels, it's quite clear that it says that this is not a strategy, and yet it then refers to Appendix 1, which is, and it talks about aspirations. And then Appendix 1 is Local Health Economy, End of Life and Palliative Care Strategy. So presumably this is something that is already in existence. I suppose my questions are, who does it apply to? Who signed up to it? How is it coordinated through the whole system? And at the end of this piece of work that you're doing, what weight, what teeth, what influence is it going to have to make the changes that you've heard of? I know that you've had individual carers and personal experiences that have informed the work that you're doing, and I want to come on to that a little bit later. But I'm not quite sure where this piece of work is going and what effect it's going to have, what influence it's going to have across the whole system.
So Karen, shall there were quite a few questions there. So
yeah, there was. Sorry.
I'm going to break them down, and if I haven't answered them, then we'll just go through them. I was going to start writing, but sometimes when you write the questions down, you miss the essence, and I don't want to do that. So if we actually, the first question that you were asking was saying that you were interested in the greater detail.
Yeah.
So, and I think one of the first questions you asked was, who else was signed up to it, and if this isn't a strategy, what's in Appendix 1? So if we look to Appendix 1, that's actually a piece of work that exists across the system already. And actually within the body of the report, it reflects on the fact that we do have a strategy that's been developed already, but actually this review isn't going to do the traditional thing, which says, what does the strategy tell us it does? Are we doing that? This review is very different in terms of who signed up to it and its teeth and its influence. Let's take all of those. So if we have a look at, in terms of I don't think you have the paper in front of you, Karen. I'm going to refer to, I think it's section 1 of the paper. I don't have it in front of me, but obviously as the author, I'm recalling that this section 1 actually talks about all of the different groups across the system who are really involved in end-of-life care that we've shared this methodology with. And so we've got a range of people within that section 1 who've had to think about what I've suggested as the way to do this review in a different way, and those people have signed up to it, and those are all groups with influence and contain our lead clinicians across the system. The group itself, the End of Life Review, is a subsection of one of our STP clusters. I don't know if you've had Steve Trenchard talk to HOSC in relation to these structures, so that would be an understandable. So if I explain that governance, that would make sense to the committee. So we are a priority of the community and place-based cluster, and that reports directly upwards into the ICS shadow board. So that gives you a sense of the governance and locates where the review is. And also in section 1 gives us the detail of the individuals who've signed up to the approach. The approach in itself is about, you say at the end of it, will it have teeth? So actually what we're doing, and it's within the report, and it's also was within the PowerPoint, but sometimes, and you're quite right, and you brought it out in your last conversation with the previous presenters, so I'm happy to just really talk through the methodology a little more. So in the first phase, what we're doing is we're collating all of the information that people have fed back to us. Because in a traditional review, we wouldn't necessarily do that. We would start looking for what's the problem. What we're trying to do is use the information that we've already got to identify some areas for action. The second part of the review is about that action. So after we've got however many pieces of feedback and information and we've brought it all together, we'll have 4 key areas, 4 key questions that we'll be working on. And when I say we, that's going to be system working groups. So those individuals who are really key, frontline clinicians, managers, Health Watch and others, who are key to actually starting to develop what are the responses, what are the solutions to the questions. And I think in the paper, and I want to say about section 5, but I may be incorrect, I actually talk about those working groups in the phase 2 element. I think it's 5 or 6. I think it's maybe 5.61. I start talking about how actually once we identify the areas, we work together collectively as a system, not as a CCG, collectively as a system with patient input to decide those areas. We then work through how do we change that experience. So how do we make the solutions? And some of the solutions clinicians can make themselves. And that's the learning from COVID part that Alison referred to, because we have seen how together we can solve some of the things that people have just taken years and to debate about, but through clinicians talking about, well, why isn't that working? They find a way that makes it work. So that's the first way that we would see the change in action. The second part is actually sometimes when we look to a solution, it's going to require more than what we've currently got, or we might have a partner who isn't willing. So we might have somebody who says, well, I know the rest of you have accepted a particular aspect, but for us, we can't take it on board. We then have the ability as a priority of the cluster-based board, as an STP priority, to actually escalate that up so that our system leaders will have the conversation about, well, how do we remove this barrier that's coming forward in the solution. So unlike a traditional review, when it ends, we will actually have affected the change as part of it. So I'm hoping that answers some of your questions. If there's some that I haven't, please just ask me again, and I'll just focus my answer in on your more direct question.
I suppose if we just go back to the very beginning, and you say you collected data and information, and that then informed your way forward and the questions that you needed.
It will do. We're still in phase 1, so that's what we're currently doing at the moment.
Okay, so I suppose there's a little bit more detail around what is the kind of data that you're collecting, because we did we tried to, as a joint HOSC, collect some sort of data and information from various PALS organisations and complaints organisations, and we didn't really, we struck out. We really didn't get too much information from them to try and get some sort of understanding. So I'm just wondering, what is the exact data that you are collecting and referring to?
What will happen is each individual stakeholder has been asked to review the information they hold to produce the questions. So what they will do is they will look at what information they've got. So if I take a stakeholder such as SAP, they will have PALS, patient feedback, as you mentioned. They will have CQC feedback. I know certainly that Jules, who is their lead end-of-life nurse, will have a whole range of feedback. So they, as a stakeholder, SAP as a stakeholder, will look at all of those different sources of information and also their own experiences from their frontline clinicians that Jules is dealing with on a daily basis, and that will be their information. If I look to HealthWatch, their information and will come from the surveys that they've completed. It'll come from the information that patients have fed back to them on the site. So different stakeholders will have different types of information. The CCG is a stakeholder, so we will have data around performance, we'll have data around complaints and PALS that the CCG and quality concerns, so we will have that information as a stakeholder to feedback. So each stakeholder will be looking at their own data and information to actually start triangulating the themes. We've also, in the letter that's been shared with our stakeholders, we've asked them to think across the system, because quite often around end-of-life care, it's not necessarily, in fact, majority of the time, it's not a singular organisational issue that we're trying to address. It's about a pathway of care, either between one organisation and another, or across, so that could be organisations such as YMAS and primary care. So it's not necessarily a single organisational issue, and we've actually encouraged stakeholders to think about what is the biggest thing for them that isn't connecting in our system. So we'll have all of that individual reviewed data from each of the stakeholders, so different perspectives. You're quite right, when you look at just PALS information, because I've reviewed all of our 2 CCG's PALS information, the level of detail in that isn't sufficient enough sometimes to really get underneath the skin, and that's why I've offered, and I have had people take me up on my offer of doing individual one-to-one in-depth interviews, and I'll just make that offer to HOSC if there is anybody who would like to take up the offer of contributing to the review through an interview or submitting me a narrative of their own experiences to pull in on the review. Very, very happy, or if they are aware of friends or family and want to put them in touch with me for me to work with them on that, that would be something we would appreciate, because we do know, and I know personally, how difficult it is for individuals to have conversations to reflect back on those sorts of experiences. But we will be supplementing the data that's held by the stakeholders with that type of information and individual in-depth interviews.
Yeah, that's very helpful, and you know, and I think you might find that there will be a few that will take up your offer to contribute to this area, because I think it's something that, you know, anecdotally we've been hearing about for years, but then when you try to look into the the data side of it, behind it, that is when it becomes more difficult. And of course, anecdotally, these are personal stories, and the events that happened and have been quite traumatic in people's lives.
Yes.
And I suppose then I'm just coming on to part of the report around, it's the mythology, and it says it's been identified there are individuals who are willing to be interviewed in relation to end-of-life care experiences. I just wonder, how many of those people have you got? Because I think their qualitative data actually is far more important than the quantitative data. And I'm just wondering how many of these experiences are you using as opposed to the professional, if you like, clinician experience and viewpoint, I suppose.
So in terms of how many, it will be as many as we can reach out to. So we're putting the message out via different routes that we are wanting to offer that out. It will also be governed by the satiation point. So obviously I'm saying, oh, as many would like. If we had a sudden inrush, I would have to then look at having, if I could find other people such as Alison who may be able to assist in gaining that. I think the important thing to remember when we look at qualitative data, and I'm sure you're very aware of this, is actually the validity of one story is not made more valid by 10 stories. So I think that is really my principle. So if I got to speak to 5 people to contribute their viewers into the themed analysis that we're taking forward, to me that has as much validity as if I'd spoken to 50 people. I mean, I would endeavour to have a conversation or receive feedback from as many individuals who are willing to give it within the time frame that we're working to, would be my answer to that, Karen.
Well, I don't want to speak too much on the subject because it's a personal, not for me, but it is an individual issue that I know is going through CCG Shropcom at the moment, and that involves Jill George.
Yeah.
And she has been, well, the last email that I had from her, she's almost at the point of disengaging with the process because of the way she feels that she's been treated. And so when you're hearing, I hear you speak and I'm thinking that's exactly what I want to hear. But then I hear on the other side the experience of somebody who has tried to engage, albeit through a very personal prism of her own traumatic experience. And she's saying, I don't want to engage with this process anymore.
Chair, just to say, without going into any detail, that I am in conversation with Jill, and I'll be speaking with Jill next week. I don't want to go into any more detail than that at this meeting.
No, but I didn't really want to allude and to forgive me, Jill, and I will be emailing her and apologising for mentioning her name publicly because I know that she's had a difficult time just recently. But I just wanted to highlight that issue of actually, if people do become involved in this, what you would hate to happen is for their trauma to be, if you like, exacerbated by contributing to it. And
I think that's why it has to be such a very individual thing.
Yeah.
And that I would speak with anyone who was willing to share, just really to help them understand what the boundaries of contributing are, what the expectations of contributing are, and allowing them the medium to contribute, because for some people a narrative may be much better than actually revisiting in a verbal way their own experiences. So I think I need to give the committee the assurance that this is something that I have a considerable degree of experience within, and each individual I would speak with to ascertain their willingness and also their readiness to participate with them about taking forward any of their contributions. So absolutely understand that whenever we're working in an area, and especially in an area such as end of life, we will need to be really clear and supportive of anyone who actually is willing to come forward and share their story.
Well, that is reassuring. I'm still it's still a little bit vague to me how this is all going to work out.
It's very novel.
Sorry, Derek, did you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry, this chart thing is not working. For me, it's not working anyway. I can't indicate. So indicating by the hand, it's still. Right. All right. The reality is, Tracy, is this: that I've heard so much of this in the past. We're going to go there and we're going to sit and talk to the individual. We're going to talk to the families. We're going to make sure that they have a nice passage to death. And we continually come up with the same problems. Now, this was 6 or 7 years ago we had this, and this was supposed to be this across the board end of life strategy, and it didn't work, and it isn't working now. And I'm glad that you're taking a different approach. But it has to be an approach that goes across the borders, and not just let's contact our colleagues in South, who have got an appalling record on it, quite frankly, and the CQC have picked up on their very poor performance in this area. And it is about how do we actually raise all the standards from all the areas so we're all engaging. And regardless which part of the system that the person goes into, whether it goes into community, hospital, or whether it goes into, anywhere, that the message comes the same way, and the method of dealing with them comes the same way, and that they are respected. I mean, I had some comments from a well-known person who phoned me up and said, look, we're being told that they're actually applying the do not resuscitate to many areas now without permission, and we are really peed off with this. Now, we have to make sure that does not happen, that, that when people are treated and when people are dying and the families are involved in this up to the hilt, and there isn't this conflict about what they actually want at the end of the day. And I understand perfectly, you can't deal with sudden deaths. No one can. But when we have this area that people are known that they have got a very limited amount of time on with this, that they are treated in a proper, respectful way.
So Derek, I recognise that the way that has happened before in terms of how we've approached doing a review and then writing a report and a recommendation, I recognise that that doesn't deliver the changes that we want to see, the very things you've articulated. And that's why I have suggested to and worked with those groups to get them to accept this different methodology and different way of doing it, because what I want us to do, I want us not only to be doing the talking, but I want us to be trying out the different methods. The consistency of approach is really, really important. And I hear what you're saying in terms of how we ensure that we're improving that experience for more people, and how are we getting better? How can we get better at actually doing that? So, and this is what the part of the review wants to do. However, what I've recognised, and that's why we've got the scope of the review, and why I'm really wanted to come and share back with you at HOSC where we're at before we get into the full swing of it, is if we try to look at the whole of this pathway, it's absolutely vast. So what I'm suggesting in this review is we look at the 4 areas that collectively all the stakeholders, I use SAP as an example, we've mapped across the stakeholders. I think they're in section 7 of the report. And if people feel there are additional stakeholders that I haven't included in section 7, then please just let me know, and Alison and I will get in touch with additional stakeholders. It is about that, trying to come together and do something differently rather than what we've done in the past, which hasn't brought the results. So I think that would probably be my response to your statement, unless there's any other point of clarity you wanted.
I have absolutely no faith in PALS at all. I don't think it works. I don't think you're going to get the results from it, and I certainly don't think they're recording it in any form or shape. And I think the whole PAL system has to be looked at again in a completely different atmosphere, and doing it as a one-off, a one set-up body to deal with all organisations, and not all the police policing themselves, because it just doesn't work. And really, we need to actually get that dealt with in a much more appropriate way. And until we have a proper complaints procedure, you're never going to get a real grasp of, look, something's going wrong here. And I think that's been the biggest failure that we've had within the system so far. We have PALS that just doesn't work, and there's a complaints procedure that is not known to the average person. And when someone has been treated badly at the end of life, the last thing the family want to do is go through a torn out complaints procedure. So we need to get that set up as well and done properly. And I hope that we will try well, certainly we'll be pressing David Evans for something like that. But I really think we need to make sure that you are getting the information you need in order for us to be able to put it right in the future.
And part of the review, that the first element, when we look back at the information we're receiving, will help inform part of our understanding of what information sources we've currently got available within our own service. In terms of the wider PALS issue, I don't know until the themes come in and collaboratively we've agreed whether that will be one of the ones that we're looking at. And actually what you're talking about, I believe, is far wider than end of life in terms of PALS and PALS complaints. So I'm sure you'll take that up separately with David Evans and as our most senior leader in relation to that.
Yes, I hope we will be.
Oh, right. I was just waiting for somebody else to comment. I suppose you know, we've covered most of the areas, and you have given reassurance on how this is going to work as a new way of working going forward. I suppose I have a question around the where you say collectively agree 4 areas questions that we will review. I'm just wondering about how you are going to weight those, I suppose, to come up with. You are deliberately limiting yourself to 4 areas, and I'm just wondering how are you going to weight and make the decision about those areas that you work on.
So in terms of the reason, I mean, I think I've sort of talked about why we're limiting it to an area, those 4 areas, because we will have working groups underneath it. So in limiting it, it's not saying that areas not selected aren't important. The way we're going to do it at the moment is we're revolving it, because I need to see what the themes are, because I may have a situation where I've got 22 completely different themes, so I'll have to use a different approach. I may have 6, and then I can use a different methodology. There's a particular methodology called paired comparison, and this is about when, and obviously if we use this methodology, I would be taking this down to a level that all participants would be able to follow and then working. So it's about comparing each of the areas against the other, and then you conduct, so everyone does this who's involved, and you would compare, would you prefer 1 or 2, 1 or 3, 1 or 4, 1 or 5, and then you go down and for each of the suggestions you compare against each other. So there's no ranking. There's an overall question, and the overall question would be what areas are going to make the greatest impact in changing end-of-life experience for us here in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, and then you would do a ranking. So that has no weighting. That would just be absolutely everyone who's a partner within the stakeholders would do that activity. We would probably do that if we had between 5 to 10 areas. If we had 6 or 7, we may have a different type of conversation. Obviously, in non-COVID times, what we'd really like to do is to have people in the room and to use some of those engagement technologies that we have used in normal times around further people presenting, discussing and agreeing. And there is some potential to do that via virtual technology. So I think my answer to that is that we will be doing it to try to ensure that all stakeholders are having an input into taking down the long list into the short list. The actual methodology we will use will depend on how far apart we are when the responses come back from all stakeholders.
Okay, that makes sense. How are you going to measure the impact? You know, when you've done all this work and if we just roll back on, there's one question before this one about measuring impact. Just some assurance really that the people, the stakeholders that you are working with are of sufficient seniority to make those commitments to roll forward this piece of work. If you haven't got them sitting around the table or participating, that would seem to be a flaw. So can we just have some reassurance that they are of what's I'm looking for, significant standing to be able to make those decisions?
Yes. So what the question you're asking, Karen, is do they have the authority to act within their organisation?
Yes.
So if I look at some of the people that we're contacting, so we have Professor Derek Willis from the hospice, we have the lead clinician for end-of-life care within SAF, Emily Corbett. We have contacted directors of nursing in other organisations. So I think I can give you the assurance that those people with whom we are speaking have sufficient seniority. I can also give assurance that as this end-of-life review sits as a priority, we want to work with frontline staff, so we don't want to work necessarily in a hierarchical way. So we may have other clinicians who don't sit at that top ring, but what we do have from the system is the commitment to ensure that those thoughts and suggestions of our frontline staff are supported. So I think on two levels, in terms of the seniority of the stakeholders contacted and in terms of the delegated authority to those people who will be part of the working group and the governance structure it sits in, that we will not be in a position where we will not have that grip, as it were. So we wouldn't have people organising things and then somebody else going, oh, I don't know why you thought that. No, you can't do it.
Yeah, that's reassuring, and that's also reassuring that you're going to have, if you like, workers at the coalface, those people who are actually there delivering that end-of-life, hands-on end-of-life care, and understanding what their experiences are and understanding where they feel the weaknesses are in the system and where they are not supported as well as they should be.
Yes.
So I'm really pleased that you're looking at it from both ends. I suppose then that was that question, and I suppose it's measuring the impact that it was my next question. So how are you going to measure the impact?
So in terms of
because it's rather difficult, I can imagine.
It is difficult. So, and that's one of the reasons why what we've asked people to really focus in on a question, because what that does is it starts to give us a way of measuring impact. So if the question is, how do we improve something? The starting point is, well, what's the baseline and how do you know you've improved? So it's about, at the very start of the groups, when we set up the working groups in phase 2, it's really about looking at that question, looking at what evidence, information, data we've got that starts us as a baseline, and then looking at how can we improve. So it's a difficult one when you talk about patient experience, because we don't want to endlessly survey people, because we can't always get the same questions out to the same people, if you see what I mean. If I wanted to ask if somebody had experienced a poor end of life this year, I'm hoping that they would not be in the same position for me to ask them next year. So I'm hoping that they're not experiencing another end of life event in the following year. So comparing like to like is difficult.
Yeah.
What we will do as a principle for each of these working groups is say, how will we know if we make the change that we've got it right? And that could be patient surveys, it could be staff surveys, it could be saying to the staff who work on the front line, has it felt differently for you? Now we've changed, now we've got a different step in the process. It could be looking at data. So one of the ways that end of life care is measured is by the amount of admissions into an acute trust within 3 months before the actual event of end of life. So we could look at, can we see data that shows it? But what we'll do at the start of the working groups is actually agree collectively, how will we know if this working group in addressing this question has made a change? So it's just really saying we're going to do it at the start of the working group, and we're going to look at what have we got that we can measure. Some of it will be hard data and numbers, and some of it will be the more qualitative feedback about how it's feeling for those people who are involved in it.
I suppose that just leads on to why people, individuals would want to participate in this piece of work with their own experience. And I think I can speak generally for most people, is that they just don't want what happened to their loved one to happen again. And I suppose it's trying to give them the reassurance and of course every story is an individual story, but I suppose it's trying to, for them, the reason that they want to tell their story is they don't want to see it repeated, and then being able to give them the reassurance that that lesson has been learned. And I think that is going to be the difficult area. And I suppose it's once we see what the 4 areas are determined to be. I'm speaking rhetorically now. That's not really a question there. It's just more of a musing and a comment.
It is a difficult area to look at and to approach, but I think it's a really important one.
Absolutely. So, that's why we're all in agreement that this is something that we want to keep an eye on and to ensure, because as I say, anecdotally for years now, these stories keep coming through, and we're all sort of now thinking, well, something's got to change. Something is not working properly, because we're consistently hearing these stories. And they come from all over Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. They're not isolated to one particular area or one organisation. It's across the whole system. I want to bring in Lynn Crawley. She's got a question that she'd like to ask. Lynn.
Hello, this is Lynn Cawley, Chief Officer for Healthwatch Shropshire. Sorry I've joined late, and I'm also sorry I missed your presentation, Tracy. I suppose I just wanted to reflect on our experience of gathering people's views of end-of-life care. And I think it's so important to make sure when you are speaking to people about their experience that you find out when it happened. Because the difficulty is that for some people it can take them years to get to the point where they want to talk about what happened, and unless you can be clear of when their experience was, you don't know if it's reflective of the current system. So I do think that's really important. And I also wanted to ask around the involvement of the bereavement team at SATH, because it's my understanding that anyone who dies within the trust, their family is offered a meeting to talk about what's happened. And I just wondered, and obviously people will only take that up if they want to and when they feel ready to, if that might not be an opportunity to ask some discrete questions that could fit into this review.
I think that's a very good suggestion, Lynn, and I'll follow that up outside of after the meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm just trying to unpick some of the time frames. We've got the 12th of November is the winding up, I suppose, and the agreement of the 4 key questions. So that doesn't leave much time for people to sort of get involved and put their penneth worth in, or their experiences in. And then you've then got the 20th of November onwards, by which time that's what, 8 days afterwards, where you will have identified the work stream leads. Presumably the work stream leads depend upon the subjects of the work, the 4 streams identified. But have you got a rough idea of what they're likely to be? Have you sort of mapped or drafted this out?
No, because I really wanted to come at this without any preconceptions. I know what I think my top 4 would look like.
Yeah.
But I'm not committing them to paper, and I'm not discussing them, because I genuinely want this to be collaborative. We've got the timescales to give an indication of where we want to be and the pace we need to work at, but we're going to be flexible. We're not held to account. So if I have an extra few weeks doing one element and then move on to the next, I think we have to have flex. Because again, when we normally, the way we work, we like to have very detailed project plans. This type of work in collaboration, working through listening to experience, sometimes means that timescales will slightly exceed, and then we'll have to pull back in a timescale somewhere else. So yes, they're there really to show the steps in the process. We may have slightly longer for some of the steps depending on what information's coming back.
Okay, and I'm looking for assurance again from the organisations that you're working with, that because you haven't identified those 4 leads, those 4 work streams, that those leads will come from different areas, and that you have the commitment from those organisations that they will be able to provide the appropriate lead for those work streams.
So that refers back again to where we've placed the end of life review within the community and place-based cluster board. So when we get to that stage, there are some key individuals that we know lead on end of life from different organisations that we would most likely look to be our lead for each of those work groups. And if there was an issue when those individuals were approached, that's the purpose of the cluster board. We would be having those conversations, and David Stout is the SRO for that cluster board. So if necessary, we have routes of escalation should we require them, is what I'd say in terms of the assurance to that question.
Okay, and then I suppose this is probably a question that you can't answer, the ones you always hate to get, but I'm just wondering what sort of time is being allocated by the individuals working to this particular project, in terms of, is it 10% of their time, 25% of their time? Because all of these people will have other day jobs.
Obviously, I couldn't give a percentage.
No,
haven't had the conversations, but what I would say in relation to their day jobs, and this is a really key point, is that the people who I'm working with, end of life is their day job. So what we're actually looking at is how, as part of their working day, they're contributing to service improvement, system improvement, patient experience improvement, and that's part of the roles, and that's why we're looking at frontline clinicians, managers. So the people who will be working on the review are people who are currently working within end of life. The only exception is myself, and I've been allocated this to lead. So I'll be able to have those conversations should I require more or less time. That's a negotiation I'll have directly with Dave Evans.
Excellent. Well, I'm just looking to other members, if any other members would like to ask questions. I think all we're being asked to do at the moment is just to note this. Obviously, I think it's got to come back again. We would welcome it to come back. I'm just quickly whizzing through my reports and trying to get an idea of when it should come back. Somebody, Alison, I think you mentioned 6 months being the time approximated for this piece of work. So was that 6 months from September, or 6 months starting November?
I'll leave that one to Tracy, because I've only just picked this piece of work up. So
sorry.
At the moment, that 6 month ends at the end of March, but it's indicative. So if in our working groups we're really moving forward well, and we need some more time to work that through, that could go over, but that may be a very apt point to bring back and share where we've got to, because in terms of revisiting the question on impact, some of the things that we put in place may not be achievable within 1 or 2 weeks. So if we're putting in place a series of I don't know, maybe it's an educational package that needs to go across a whole workforce, that could be a 6 month project. It could be a change in documentation that requires a detailed process. So we may be able to come back and discuss where we've got to at the end of, we will be able to come back and discuss where we've got to at the end of March, but it may be that some of the work that comes out of it, and again, this is the, it's not an issue, it's the freedom of doing a review in this way, is that actually it may be ongoing post 6 months. We've contained it to 6 months in the first instance to actually give focus and drive to looking at some of the solutions to those questions, but it may turn out to be nearer 8 or 9 months. But happy to come back in March or April, if that suits Chair?
I think actually April I don't think is a goer, because we have we'll be in Purda because of the elections in Shropshire, but March definitely. And I personally don't see any problem if this is not a complete piece of work. I don't see any problem with it coming back as not quite yet finished, but this is where we're at. So I'm looking to Daniel Webb and Joseph Kowalski to actually advise me on the March meetings. Daniel, can you comment? We have a meeting in March, don't we? But I'm not sure if it's beginning or end.
Yes, Chair, just give me a moment. I'll see if I can find the date for you.
Yeah.
If anyone else has it to hand.
I think if we go beyond that, we're going into the period of Purda, and I think, you know, we just want to sort of keep this train running rather than stopping it, sort of, you know, for a couple of months whilst we get over the election period. So if you are in agreement, then we would like you to come back in March, whenever that date is. I'm just looking at the chat, and Lynn is coming up with quite a few other suggestions, and that is around Shropshire Council have been working on a bereavement support officer, Joe Robbins and Gordon Cushane, so you might like to speak to them. And they've worked closely with funeral homes, who also provide a lot of support to families and might be a source of feedback. And Amanda has come back and said 11th of March is the date of the meeting in March. So if we can tie you into that, that would be very helpful for us.
Yes, that would be a real pleasure to come back and carry on the discussion about how far we've progressed the review with members. And if there are any members who do feel able to talk with me, my details are shared, aren't they, as my email address?
Yes. So if they would like to talk to you, would you like them to email you or phone you? Email you.
I think email is good, because then we can arrange a time
that's from there.
Convenient for phoning. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, that offers there to all members, and I'm not sure how many external observers we have, but that invitation is open to all. Are there any other members who would like to ask any questions? Nope. So, well, thank you very much for the update. I think I say thank you. And we'll look forward to seeing you again in March and see how this work is progressing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you. So we're now on to item 6, which is the co-chair's update. It's been quite a quiet period, really, amazingly so. We have, as mentioned earlier, out of the live review, spoken about actually having an additional meeting in November, which will focus on mental health, particularly children's mental health. Did you want to comment on that, Daniel, or Joseph, or Derek?
Chair, I'll comment on that, just to say that we are working on the date at the moment, and it will be published in due course once I've coordinated with the relevant people.
Thank you for that, Joseph. Derek, is there anything you wanted to add?
Nothing really, Karen. As I said, it's although it's been quiet, we've been kept informed of just about everything that can be done. But as I say, I mean, you weren't very well at all the last couple of weeks, so I just hope that you seem back at you're back in form, kid.
Thank you, Derek. So I think we can call this meeting to an end. Thank you for everybody for participating. Thank you for members of the public, if there were any, for observing. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to see that information, but thank you. If there are any observations or comments or questions that members of the public would like to make, please either contact me or Amanda Holyoke, who is our committee chair. I know there's many ways that you can get in touch with us, and I'm sure those who have the interest will do. So thank you very much for attending. Can we please now end the live broadcast?